3. Hello, welcome to the College Football Insiders. Week 5 is in the books. The heat is on at Penn State and Arkansas. Alabama shocks Georgia on the road to snap a 33-game winning streak at home for the Bulldogs. Oregon, just absolutely impressive here. Early in the Dan Lanning Big Ten era, they've been insane. I can't believe it. What a great Week 5, guys. A lot of close scores, a lot of thrilling games coming down the finish. Seemed like every window from Friday on, we had something going on. I am Brandon Marcello, joined today live here on YouTube. Thanks for watching if you're here with Chris Hummer, Shahan Jayaraja, and John Talty. Let's get right into our usual Sunday segment here in the morning with Heat Check. And we'll start with James Franklin and Penn State. Penn State falling in double overtime. Guys, Penn State looked listless offensively. They were down 17-3, and I guess all they needed was, to get in the fourth quarter, and then that offense just explodes. Tie the game, would go to overtime, but the Nittany Lions lose. James Franklin now 2-21 all-time against the AP top 6. You see the graphic on the screen here. That is the second worst ever among FBS head coaches. And number 1 on that list, Frank Beamer. Man, he's a Hall of Famer. James Franklin,
just like James Franklin will be. Yeah,
James Franklin will probably be a Hall of Famer. But guys, we're going to talk plenty about Oregon, but this is the Heat Check segment. What is this? Was this it for James Franklin? Is he just never going to break through the ceiling?
This one was crazy because it felt like everything was lining up to get past that curse. Like I talked about it a couple weeks ago with Texas A&M versus Notre Dame, where they just come back and do the thing that they never do, but they just fall short, right? Like they ultimately are unable to convert. And like, look, it's very difficult to really try to nail down exactly why this Penn State team under James Franklin has never been able to get over that hump. I think that at times they are a little conservative. They don't take many chances. Like really, I mean, that Drew Allar touchdown pass was one of the first deep passes that they threw the entire game. And, you go back a couple years, right? And reporters asked James Franklin in 23, I believe it was, like, you ever just want Drew Allar to just chuck one deep? Like, you ever want to just but like sometimes you need to do stuff like that because it changes the way that you have to defend this offense. I think that that's a big part of it. I think that, again, the decision-making and the, fourth down calls, like I think that they are a very conservative team in some of these moments. And granted, it's one of the reasons that they tend to be absolutely dominant against less talented teams, but they just have not shown any ability to punch up. Because you look at the coaches on that list, right? It's a lot of coaches. I went back and looked because I hadn't heard of a number of these coaches that's on this top 5 list of the worst FBS marks ever, other than, Frank Beamer, Rich Brooks. It's like a coach from Northwestern. I believe that George Welsh was from Northwestern in like the 80s, and Alex Agassi was like at Virginia or something. I might have those flipped. But like places where it's okay that you don't beat top 6 opponents. This is not the case at Penn State. And I think that for James Franklin, the thing that was most encouraging to me is that after that game, he kind of came to the table and was like, yeah, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, we've got that clip. Let's play it real quick now that we're talking about it. James Franklin here after the game.
How do you personally maintain your belief?
Yeah, again, I kind of look at the entire picture. I get that narrative, and it's really not a narrative. It's factual. It's the facts. I get it, but I try to look at the entire picture and what we've been able to do here. But at the end of the day, we got to find a way to win those games. I totally get it. And I take ownership and I take responsibility. At the end of the day, I wanted that for those kids in that locker room. I wanted that for those kids in that locker room, how hard they work, how much they sacrifice. And we had our opportunities. But yeah, I take responsibility.
The fact of the matter is that this will always haunt him unless he wins a national championship. And it really will. And I go back to Big Ten media days this past year. It seemed like every other question was something along the lines of his record against the AP top 5 or trying to break through the ceiling. And I know it's got to get old for him, but for him to own up on it and say it's just the facts now, I don't know how that sets with the fans. I mean, nothing's going to set well with any fan base after a loss, but it's incredible that all of the success he has had, he is still everywhere he goes. He's going to face that question. Graphics are going to be up on the screen whenever they face a top 5 or top 10 opponent. And this is a great coach that just can't break through. And it's like Frank Beamer in the past, we haven't quite had a coach like that over this long period of a time, a decade plus, where he just can't do that one last step.
I would agree to a point. Like, you have to give James Franklin some credit, nationally and as a Penn State fan, right? He's probably the ultimate high floor coach in college football. Like, Penn State does not have the same resources of a Michigan or an Ohio State. That's just the reality. They're not going to recruit to the same level. What Penn State has gotten out of this program over the last decade is very impressive. I'm actually going to shift the attention away from James Franklin for a second. I know it's an easy pinata to hit, but I'd like to turn the focus towards Drew Allar, if y'all don't mind for a second, if this is heat check and pressure check. When Penn State landed Drew Allar, he was, I think, the number 1 quarterback recruit in his class, ahead of Cade Klubnik at the time for 24/7 Sports. This was the guy who was supposed to raise the ceiling for Penn State. He was the guy, like, after years of Trace McSorley and quarterbacks.
Legendary Trace McSorley. Best quarterback in Penn State history, Trace McSorley.
Trace McSorley was a great quarterback for Penn State, but had some physical limitations, just like Sean Clifford did, that prevented from Penn State in the biggest moments from taking that step a lot of the times. You could point to other areas. Offensive line has been a bugaboo for Penn State for a long time, even with kind of the running backs they've had go through there that covered up some of that. But quarterback was the area with Drew Allar coming in that we thought could see this program take another step. And it just hasn't happened. Drew Allar, has been, I think if you talk to people in NFL circles, just a curiosity for years, right? Like, the tools, the physical makeup are all there, but it just doesn't click. He seems to think too much mechanically. He doesn't get the ball out on time. He, for as big as he isn't an elite athlete and can't really get Penn State out of a lot of trouble. And I think it's pretty damning for Penn State and what they think about Drew Allar, at least based on what we've seen so far. That, as Shahan mentioned earlier, his first pass over 20 yards and his only one all game was that touchdown he threw in the fourth quarter. I think Penn State only threw 8 passes over 10 yards the entire game. In a situation where at home against a top 6 opponent, you want your senior quarterback to take over, and they never trusted Drew Allar to do that.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately when you think about this team and if it's ultimately going to fall short, that's going to be on the shoulders of Drew Allar and how far he can take this team.
Yeah, Drew Allar comes in, as you said, just an incredible recruit. But I thought also the moment that, this is when they turn the corner here, is when they hired Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas. He's a great schemer. I thought he was going to open things up for them, make them a little bit more explosive. And he has at times, you see it. And even in this past game, the movement, the pre-snap movements, that's Kotelnicki. But I guess Penn State just is what it is under James Franklin at this point, schematically, no matter who the coordinator is going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways you should be, right? You have the best running back tandem in college football. You should lean on those guys. You should get them the ball as many ways as you can. But if you're going to go out and add 3 players from the transfer portal at receiver, including Deboer Pena, who did not come cheap, to Penn State.
Yeah.
Not cheap. And I mean, Fran Brown would let you know what his demands were. He did not get $2 million.
Yeah. Miami was willing to pay a lot of money to get him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he is a guy that Penn State invested in. And like, other than I think a jet sweep, he didn't have a target, I believe, until the third quarter on Saturday. So like, this is just a situation where like Penn State isn't using the horses it went out and got.
Is Penn State in the Big Ten championship game later this year?
I said no at this point. And I think that it's a combination of factors. One, they haven't played anybody. And I think that in part because of that, and I was talking to someone about this earlier this week, like the Drew Allar stuff has almost been under the radar. Like, we've talked a lot about Arch and Klubnik and other struggles of those high profile QBs. The Allar stuff's kind of been underneath the surface just because they've been playing nobodies. No offense to Villanova, where my dad went to school, but they're not playing big teams so far this year.
Jay Wright ain't walking through that door.
Right, exactly. So I think, but he had not been good up to this point. So this was a real test. I think that he, I was at Alabama, Georgia, so I saw very little of this game. The little I saw, it didn't look great. And I think there's going to be an opportunity where we look back at a 2-year period where this was the moment for Penn State. And I remember writing last year, they should have beaten Notre Dame, and it felt like they should have been in the title game. I thought they were the better team than Notre Dame. They let it slip through their fingers. It felt like a major missed opportunity. But then they bring the whole band back. They get all these players to come back that could have gone on to the NFL. They get Jim Knowles to come from Ohio State. This is the all-in year. This is the last dance approach that we saw Michigan and Ohio State do to great success. And to Chris's point, like, they recruit at a pretty high level, but they are not at an elite level when you think of the absolute upper echelon of the sport, especially from a high school recruiting standpoint. They've actually slipped a little bit the last couple of years. So it feels like a potential drop-off is coming after this year. And so if you can't get to that level that fans expect, you might take a step back and you're going to wonder, man, we really let this one, slip through our fingers, especially in what feels like maybe the most wide open year I can think of. I know we'll probably talk about that more, but in terms of college football, like, there's so many flaws in so many teams that, like, this feels like a year that, like, for Penn State, you got to try to win it. And, on September 28th, I'm not feeling great about it.
Drew Allar's now 0-6 himself against top 6 teams in the AP poll. Let's move on to Alabama going into Athens and snapping Georgia's 33-game home winning streak. Obviously, Kalen Deboer and Alabama's not in this heat check, but we talk about Georgia and Kirby Smart seeing ghosts every time Alabama steps on that field. It's really incredible. It doesn't matter who the coach is there. He just can't seem to get over himself. And watching this game, and obviously, John, you were there, I was shocked at just some of the decision making, and then also just the mistakes this Georgia team made on the field in big critical moments in the second half. I mean, I was tweeting during the game, like, someone explain Cash Jones to me. Like, why are we giving him the ball in the 2 most critical spots offensively in the second half for you, especially after the first time it absolutely failed? If you guys didn't watch the game, but what I'm talking about here is Cash Jones gets a quick handoff on 4th and 1 at Alabama's 8-yard line, where if they kicked a field goal, it ties the game at 24, but instead they go for it and they hand the ball off to Cash Jones, and LT Overton explodes pass, by the way, 2 freshmen on the right side of Georgia's offensive line, and that's where they choose to run, and Cash Jones kind of just stumbles after LT Overton sticks his hand out and falls to the turf. It looked like a Three Stooges act. To be quite honest. Kalen Deboer, we'll talk about him in a second. We'll get to that, about this easing some of the pressure there. But Kirby Smart here, and I wasn't there. I didn't get to see his press conference, but man, would I be asking him a lot of questions about some of the decisions they made in the second half.
He said he would do that.
He
would do it 10 out of 10 times.
Say that again.
I'm going to say it again. He said
John,
that he would do that go for it on 4th down 10 out of 10 times. And he said that, the question is whether you go tempo, which is what they did. They try to go fast to try to catch him off guard. Or do you slow down? Do you put in Josh McCray, their 240-pound running back, and just let him go? Obviously hindsight's 2020, but in the moment, I mean, being in the stadium, like, none of us really understood it. Like, wait, what just happened? It didn't make sense. In some ways, I can appreciate the aggressiveness. we talked a lot about Penn State, Oregon. Dan Lanning was very aggressive in that game. It worked out. But there is something, having covered, I think, all of these Georgia Alabama games that Kirby's been a part of. There's just something I wrote about this for CBS Sports. Like, there's something like almost like about playing Alabama that like short circuits his brain, where he feels like I have to be aggressive in these games. And he does uncharacteristic mistakes that he doesn't typically do. He's such a great coach, but I can remember SC championship going for a fake punt and it blowing up in their face and giving Alabama the momentum back in 2018. Like, he just does this against Alabama. And at the time I chalked it up to like, he wants to beat Nick Saban so bad that it kind of, messes him up a little bit. We've seen Lane Kiffin do that at Ole Miss where he just goes way too aggressive and it never worked. But now it's happening against Kalen Deboer too. And Deboer's now 7-0 against Kirby, Sark, Dan Lanning, who you could argue probably 3 of the top 5 coaches in the game, which is pretty unbelievable. But this Georgia team, it still felt like being in the stadium and just, it felt like almost like Jaws. Like, it kept, like, the shark just kept getting closer and closer. And it felt like they were going to get them, on that drive. You're deep in Alabama's territory. It felt like they were going to get a touchdown and Georgia's going to win this game. And it's still, now 12 hours or so from that game ending, like, it's still kind of unbelievable to me that Georgia lost. Like, I mean, Alabama came out great to start. I think they did a lot of things right, but it still felt like with all the momentum toward the end of the game that Georgia was going to win. And then they didn't. It was because of a lot of either bad decisions, risky decisions, or just straight up dumb plays, like quarterback jumping over the pile. And that's something I'm sure Kirby is just going to absolutely be beside himself when they rewatch.
I love the
film.
commentators on television. You get to see it, but they're like, this isn't practice. We're not just jumping on top of the pile because everybody's having fun. The whistle had blown. Yeah,
That
it's
was-
just
that was
like in
Ellis
slow
Robinson,
motion
right?
too, the way he jumps. Yeah, it was Ellis
That was
Robinson.
Ellis-
Yeah.
Yeah, all-time cornerback recruit who is really had his struggles this year. I'll put it this way. He is really bad.
Ellis Robinson the 4th. Let's move on. Oh, we're going to move on here. One more thing about Georgia. The defense is nowhere where it used to be 4 or 5 years ago. And I wrote about this just from watching it on TV, but that defensive line just doesn't have it, right?
Hasn't
There
really
was
been what we think of Georgia's defense the last couple of years. Like, I'm pulling up the stat now, but I believe Georgia was like pretty like mid.
If you remember Chris Hummer earlier this year,
Producer Aaron's still cutting the clip short. Mid for Georgia standards, but like, I'm just going to say it now. Like, if you look at Georgia's pass rush this year, it is worse than mid. It is decidedly below average. This is a Georgia team, to Brandon's point about what he wrote about, but I think ranks 116th right now in pressure rate. That's right next to UMass and Sam Houston, for context. That's Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs. And this is a team that lost a couple first rounders to the NFL draft on the edge. And then they lost Damon Wilson in the portal to Missouri. Yeah. And I really bet they wish they had that guy right now, because Damon Wilson's playing like one of the best edge rushers in college football.
Yeah, that defensive line has only had 4 tackles for loss all season, combined, the entire defensive line. Now, listen, linebackers, if your defensive line's good, your linebackers are going to have great stats as well. But the push just isn't there. And Alabama was gashing them at times. And then also in the first half, we saw what Ty Simpson was doing, just slicing and dicing them through the air and everything. But this is nowhere close to the Georgia we saw in the past. And as much flack as Georgia's defensive line got last year, especially for their struggles against the run, they seemingly have improved upon that. But this isn't a defensive line that should be feared anymore, and certainly by opposing quarterbacks, because Ty Simpson had himself a fantastic performance on the road against this defensive front.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was texting with a buddy who has covered Georgia for a while, and he feels like one of the biggest things that changed with this Georgia defense was going from Dan Lanning, who's very aggressive as a coordinator, to Glenn Schumann in 2022 has maybe changed the DNA of this unit a little bit more than people think. Now, of course, that 2022 unit was still very, very good, but I think it's kind of atrophied a bit from there. And when you go back, Georgia in 2021 was number 6 in sacks per game. And in 2022, they fell to, I believe it's like 48th in sacks per game. And when you look at the stats on the 2021 team, yeah, the defensive line was incredible on that team. I mean, that was, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and all these guys. Yeah. But a lot of those tackles for loss and sacks came from non-traditional places. came from linebackers and defensive backs. They were not afraid to blitz, to create pressure, because they also knew that the defensive line could clean up after them. Well, with Glenn Schumann, I think they've really relied on their base defense for a lot more of their pressure. And it's notable. It's notable in the way that teams attack you. Now, again, they're always going to be a defense that's built more than anything around stopping the run and doing it at an elite level typically. But I think that what happens is when you have these quarterbacks like Ty Simpson, who are really good when they're not under pressure, the secondary has just not been good enough to win, sort of in base coverage every single snap. In 2021, like, I know that our buddy Richard Johnson said it a while back. Like, we're going to look at this 2021 Georgia defense as 2019 LSU offense for defense, because you look at every single position on that group and they were elite. They had like 7 first-round picks out of 11 starters on that defense. And I think there's just been this assumption that they're going to continue to restock year over year. And that has just frankly not been the case. They had a golden generation on the defensive line come through in 21 and 22, and they have not had that ever since. And combined with a coordinator that I don't think is necessarily playing especially aggressively, that's how you run yourself into trouble.
I just want a quick point. I will say aggressiveness has never really been Kirby Smart's forte as a defensive coordinator. He trusts his front four to get home. I think Georgia's blitz rate in 2021 was actually lower than it is in 2025 right now, at least through 4 games. So I think this is just a symptom of Georgia's front not being able to get home the way Kirby Smart was used to the front getting home. And then we don't talk about it a lot, like with the front, but the secondary has really struggled. We talked about Ellis Robinson a little bit ago. Like, he's been shredded this year. We watched the Tennessee game. That secondary, like, with 5-star chess pieces all over the place, has looked a lot different. They really look like they missed Malachi Starks through 4 games, like that kind of back end anchor of the secondary. And Brandon, I just want to shift the focus back to Kalen Deboer for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier he's 7-0 against Sark, Dan Lanning, and Kirby Smart, right?
Yeah, John mentioned that. Yeah,
John, I'm sorry. I do want to point out that that's 5-0 between Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart. Like, Kalen Deboer, for whatever reason, scheme-wise, has owned that, like, Kirby Smart tree. He's averaged over 30 points per game. He's 5-0 in those situations against those 2 coaches. And I think it shows, especially in the big games, like Kalen Deboer can get up and scheme with the best of them if you give him time.
Yeah, and we saw that. We saw that Washington during their playoff run. We saw it as an OC at Indiana, and obviously as a head coach at Fresno State. He's 7-1 against top 10 opponents in his career. But the thing with him, it's almost like it's the opposite of James Franklin, right? It's like, but when's he stumble his toe during the season? We saw it last year. We saw it this year.
And he's especially good coming out of buys. Just at Alabama alone, I mean, coming out of bye last year looks great against Georgia. They win. Coming out of a bye last year looks great against LSU. Did it again. Like, he's very good in those moments. Like, give him that extra week. He's one of the most dangerous coaches in America coming up with the game plan. And like, him and Ryan Grubb were in their bag last night. It was a lot of fun, especially that Caden Proctor pass was awesome. But now it's like you said, it's like, all right, it's this exact scenario played out a year ago, right? Like, they beat Georgia. We all love him. Kalen Deboer is the man. They lose the next week to Vanderbilt. And it's like, we haven't experienced this before in Alabama. So they've got Vanderbilt next week. They got Diego Pavia. That offense is rolling. Like, this is a real test. Like, we know you can get up for the big ones. Can you get up for that, like, random game? And Vanderbilt's obviously not random this year, but that's where they struggled last year, was those kind of, like, it's not the big game. It's the kind of in-between game. And so we'll see if he's better about it this year.
And last thing to touch on with that, I'm very curious because let's keep in mind, Kalen Deboer was a small school coach for many years, right? At the NAIA level. And as somebody who's covered their fair share of Division III games, the thing with that level especially is that there are 3 games on your schedule you need to care about. And then like 8 where you just show up and you're so much better it doesn't matter. Well, that's not the case when you're playing in the Southeastern Conference. And I'm curious how Kalen Deboer's mindset changes going from a situation where, again, even at Washington, I mean, again, there are Pac-12 teams that can't necessarily hang with you. At Fresno State, there are teams that can't necessarily hang with you. How does your mindset change after realizing, in week 6 against South Carolina, in week 9 against Mississippi State, these teams are actually good enough that if we don't bring our A game, it's going to matter. I'm curious if his mindset changes, and I'm curious if his preparation changes as well.
I think it helps on the NAIA level when you only have like 4 full-time head coaches, and then you're at Alabama and you've got all these analysts and everything to help you out. But exactly right. I mean, there's a mindset there when you just have games like that, and even dating back to the Pac-12 days. Okay, we got to hit a break here. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the heat check with the mess that is Arkansas.
Absolutely amazing. Lamar dancing around the pocket. He does this so well. All the way for the touchdown.
We are back, College Football Insiders. If you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe and search for us wherever you get your podcast, College Football Insiders. Leave us a 5-star review and give us a thumbs up whenever you hear Chris Hummer call something mid. Okay.
Do we want to do a quick mid takes, just like something in society you think is mid that people?
We should. I don't know. 6'7", as my son would say.
Oh gosh.
Wow, our number just spiked.
Mine does as well.
Okay, guys. Last part here in heat check. The Arkansas Razorbacks, the historic loss against Notre Dame, their first ever meeting against the Golden Domers, 56-13. They allowed 420 yards in the first half. They trailed 42-13. They hadn't allowed that many points in the first half since they went to USC against Reggie Bush in 2005. They ended up losing that game 70-17. I remember watching it and being completely depressed as an Arkansas student at the time. But this just felt a lot different. We know that Arkansas has struggled the last 3 weeks. They lost games that they had a chance to win in the final 2 minutes. They're going down to score near or outside the red zone against Ole Miss on the road, and then also Memphis on the road. They lost both games because of late game fumbles. And then they do come back home. First game in Razorback Stadium, a big game, I should say, first big game in Razorback Stadium this year, and they absolutely laid an egg. The defense was atrocious. I was there covering the game, and you heard boo birds a lot. I think there were 2 hall calls throughout the entire game, and if you know anything about the Arkansas fan base, they love their hall calls, but the hall calls were more like boo birds throughout this game.
Brandon, for those of us who haven't been there, what does a hog call sound like? Can you give us something?
I'm not doing it. Not doing it. You guys
we
can,
yours going up.
Yeah, well. But not a lot of hog calls in this game, and you heard fire Pittman chants at one point. I think luckily for Pittman, the "Let's Go Irish" chant after a touchdown covered it up, and then they stopped. But listen, Sam Pittman went into last week very much on the hot seat, and now is in a situation where there will be questions about whether he survives this week. Arkansas is in a bye week right now. I will tell you, as of 9:30 Central Time, it was quiet among the coaching staff there at Arkansas. But Sam Pittman was asked, are you going to make any changes during the bye week? He said it's possible. He's got to look at it. But the big question is should Sam Pittman be fired? I asked him after the game. I said, there's some fans out there that believe you should be fired. You shouldn't be the head coach anymore. And he interrupted me and says, is that a question? Or you just asked, well, you haven't let me finish. I go, what would you say to those fans? And he had a great response, I thought, saying that he'd be mad as hell at him too. But is this beyond repairing, guys? Is this the end of the road for Sam Pittman?
It's so interesting because it feels like everybody knows that this is the end of the road, but everybody also knows that Sam can't just retire because he wants to get that bigger buyout, and Arkansas can't fire him right now because they want to get that smaller buyout. And so everybody's just caught here in this holding pattern. For people who don't know, his buyout is very unusual. So putting aside the pandemic season, since 2021, if he has a record over 500, his buyout is bigger than if he falls under 500. So right now, it's about $9 million if he falls below 500, which he would do if they lose their next 3 games, which is frankly very, very reasonable that could happen. His buyout falls under $6 million, so it's over $3 million. How, do you quibble about that? Do you just decide to make a change anyway? It's a question that I think that is going to be asked, but I think that it's so interesting kind of having these contrasts of coaches talking in the post-game press conference. Because again, James Franklin acknowledging, like, it's not a narrative, it's fact. Like, we can't win these games. Sam Pittman saying, the fans, if I was a fan, I'd be pissed as hell. Honestly, I'm pissed as hell at myself too. But, versus even a Kirby being like, well, we play a lot of games. This is just one game. It doesn't really matter, and it's just interesting how these coaches handle it differently. But when I saw Sam Pittman talk, like you said, Brent, I mean, it was a great question and a great answer. I felt like I saw a coach who understands that we're just kind of biding time for logistical reasons.
Despite the fact that
Arkansas's defense, 116th in total defense this year. The offense has been what's carried them, right? But the offense is struggling now under Bobby Petrino. They have scored a total of 16 points in the last 6 games, dating back to that meltdown at Memphis, and then 13 points in the first half against Notre Dame, and then nothing to show for offensively in the second half. So, like, everything's a mess there. It isn't like you can say, well, at least this one side of the ball. Like, the offense has struggled the last 2 weeks too.
Yeah, I was going to say, despite the fact that he's the only SEC head coach who has me blocked on Twitter, I like Sam Pittman. I think that we'll look back and enjoy, some of what this period has been. Arkansas fans don't, but like, this was a hire that felt like doomed from the start, and it's been better than I expected in a lot of ways. And Sam's an interesting, fun personality, but it's hard to imagine it turning back around. And I think what's so interesting, there's no way of knowing, but sometimes in college football, it can feel like it's almost like an avalanche, where it's like, if you can stem it, then you can turn around the momentum. And like, to lose the way they did against Ole Miss and Memphis is just such a great what if to me. If you win both of them, we're having a whole different conversation. And maybe Arkansas is rolling, but it felt like that effort against Notre Dame was the result of losing 2 games that they probably should have won. And it felt like things just fell apart. And at this point, they have a bye. Can you get back on track? For me, it feels unlikely that they're going to. Who knows? He's surprised me in many ways in the past as well, but it just felt like they had to have at least one of those 2 games, and that fact they didn't, it's hard to see a major turnaround coming the rest of the season.
I mean, Notre Dame was only a 4.5-point favorite going into this game. A lot of people thought it was going to be close. Some of us at CBSSports.com, several of us picked Arkansas in the game to win.
We're all trying to find the guy who did it,
including me. I just thought they're back home.
That didn't age well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I think they've lost the narrative here. They've lost their spot in the line. They've lost their place on the page. Said whatever you want to say, it's just not going very well. And as I wrote yesterday at CBSSports.com, it's the end of the Razorback road here for him. And I think it's just a matter of time. That's my opinion. I know people out there want to say Brennan's reporting something. That's my opinion right now. But I can tell you, as of 9:30 Central Time, everything was quiet as of right now, entering a bye week. But that could change at any minute. We'll find out soon enough. After Arkansas's bye week, guys, they go to Tennessee. Arkansas upset Tennessee at home last year. The Vols are going to be out for blood. Just a terrible spot for this Razorbacks program.
By the way, we do need to point out, last week you go and see Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. You write the Fire Gundy column. It takes 4 extra days, but eventually he's fired. You go to Arkansas this week, you see Sam Pittman, you see him get obliterated. That gave you feelings that you haven't had since you were a student watching Arkansas get obliterated. You write the Fire Pittman column. So who are you killing next? Are you going to Auburn next week? Are you going to Billy Napier? Are you? What's next?
I'm going with Florida State, Miami. I don't think anybody's gonna get fired there.
I can't wait for this one.
But you never know how crazy it is. Yeah, having said all that, no one wants to act like this, like a little baby, but I hate that crap. I hate having to do that stuff. But you had any?
I will say, Brandon, real quick, just from a writer reporter perspective, I thought your column was very poignant on Saturday. I think you acknowledged how much Sam Pittman did for Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
That is a hire, as John said, seemed doomed from the start. This is somebody that took over for Chad Morris for a program that was absolutely broken. and he's put the pieces back together. And we should certainly acknowledge what Sam Pittman did for Arkansas, but sometimes you do lose it. Sometimes the message doesn't go through the way it once did before. And it's clear watching that defense on Saturday that I don't know if that message is sounding the way it used to.
Well, and it's funny because, again, it's almost like this buyout situation is kind of like screwing everybody in a way, because I think that there's absolutely a pathway where I think, heading into this bye, if that's not a situation, that Arkansas comes to him and is like, man, we love you. We respect you. Like, we've got a great relationship. We want you to be a part of this program forever when you retire. But like, obviously this is not working. Let's bow out gracefully. But you're almost caught in this extended marriage because you just can't work out these logistics at a certain point. And so,
yeah, let me throw one other thing out and we'll move on here. Like, no one else on that staff, if they were to do an interim coach, is more equipped or prepared to do so than Bobby Petrino. And we all know Bobby Petrino's past. It would take several books to recap here, but it's also an interesting situation from the standpoint, like, if you fire Sam Pittman and maybe the most qualified person on your staff is Bobby Petrino, how do you explain to your fans, number one, we're not going to make Bobby Petrino the interim coach if you don't? How do you explain that away? And then if you do promote him to interim coach, what the hell do you do if he ends up winning a lot of games for you all of a sudden? Now, I'm not saying that's likely to happen, but that puts you in a very, very difficult spot. I mean, this whole thing is just, this whole situation right now is an absolute minefield in the Ozarks. So there you go. But things can change. I keep looking at my watch to see if I get any text messages or any phone calls. I've gotten messages out, but as of 9:30 Central Time, everything was pretty quiet there. Okay. Now we finally move into our second part of the show here. How did we get here? Most of us were birthed. So Oregon here is back in the national championship mix, gentlemen. Just the biggest win for Dan Lanning yet on the road. Since they've joined the Big Ten, they have had some early season bangers, them beating Ohio State in a tight game there at Autzen early last season. And then Saturday night going into a whiteout at Penn State at night, of all things, and being able to pull out the win after building a double-digit win and holding on. How did Oregon get to this point? Because, guys, I remember, what was it, Lanning's first year, they played Georgia, right? And they get obliterated. And I remember Kirby Smart after that game saying, Dan knows that we are the better team. We have more talent, but he's going to get them there. He's got Oregon there now. You can see the talent. You can see the depth. You see the defensive line. You see the type of guys that he wants in his program. And they look very much like an SEC type of defensive line and defense.
I thought that's my thought. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Chris. I was
just going to say that's my main takeaway coming out of Saturday. I've talked to a couple of staffers and coaches who've played Oregon this year, and the first thing they always brought up was speed, right? Like, this Oregon team is fast. Like, they have multiple receivers that are sub 10.5 guys in the 100. They have a linebacker who's a sub 10.5 guy in the 100. Their defensive tackle, Amari Washington, hit 21 miles per hour on the GPS earlier this year. Like, they move. Like, that team is so fast. But
that's faster than Ralphie. Do you guys see how fast Ralphie runs? The new Ralphie runs?
Ralphie like woke up late. He's in his teenage years. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't ready to make that.
Gotta get his conditioning up.
Yes, exactly. But I came out of this game just 6'7". I came out of this game thinking that Oregon has changed, like, the way they handle themselves up front. Like, part of that is what they did in the transfer portal. I think we highlight a little too much of that, but like, Oregon inside the number 1 offensive tackle, the number 3 interior offensive lineman, the number 8 defensive tackle. They went into the season with intention, but like, they had this performance on Saturday night, a year after Penn State ran for almost 300 yards against them, a year after Ohio State totally owned them in the trenches in the Rose Bowl, when I think Ohio State had 8 sacks and 13 tackles for loss. Penn State didn't have a sack on Saturday night. Like, Oregon was the one that controlled the line of scrimmage and ran the ball with authority. Like, this is a Oregon team that I think very quietly maybe hasn't changed their identity. The identity is fast. The identity is speed. The identity at Oregon is flash. But like the foundation of this team is now built on something way different. And I think it makes a huge difference in environments like this. Like Dan Lanning built this team to be tough, and they are finally tough enough in the trenches to hold up in games like this.
It's an SEC team in many ways, to your point, Chris. And obviously, not only Dan Lanning with his time at Alabama and Georgia, but, guys like Tosh Lupoi who were at Alabama. I mean, they recruit at an incredibly high level, and he knows what it takes to win at the highest levels. He's seen it up close. He's been part of championship teams. So he knows the level of talent that you need up front in the trenches to be able to succeed. And so I think it's a nice mix of what's been so successful in that SEC playbook with some flash, some finesse that we kind of expect with that more West Coast style of teams. And of course, and we have to acknowledge it, like they do have a good amount of money to play with. That's been pretty successful for them in the past. It helps to recruit at a high level and succeed in the transfer portal when you have Uncle Phil that you can call and help get some money from time to time. They've had one of the best.
Sorry, when you say Uncle Phil, I get another Uncle Phil in my head. And that's not the Uncle Phil I think.
Hey, both can afford houses in Bel Air. That's really all that matters.
Very true. Phil Knight, former Nike co-founder, is who I'm referring to. But they had one of the most innovative, creative collectives as well, which I think a lot of that stuff is played out. We know that, but you have to acknowledge that is a factor. It is also, I think, sometimes unfair to Dan and the job that he's done that every coach loves to talk about how much money he has. Mike Gundy did it recently. There's a lot of jealousy, but he is a great coach. And I think that he has built something that's sustainable. And I think that was, really one of the key things. I think myself included, thought there could be a step back this year, especially with all the changes. And instead, it feels like it's maybe a step forward, which is a real credit to Dan and his staff and what they've been able to build right here in Oregon.
And this is the thing, is that we can point to all the money and resource, and I think that there's a really good case that they're as resourced as anybody in the country. But I think that they've done such a good job of being targeted, like Chris said, with their money. They bring in a player like Dylan Thieneman, who makes the final play of the game, a game-winning interception. That's somebody who came over from Purdue, who everybody wanted in the portal. It was really striking to me. Look, DeCorian Moore, the true freshman wide receiver, everybody knew what he was, right? He was number 1 receiver in the country, top 5 overall recruit, and he's been their best receiver to this point. But there's 2 other guys that come to mind. Gary Bryant, who was a rotation receiver at USC, comes in, has one of the biggest catches of the game in overtime. And then Dier Hill, who was like a mid-tier blue chip player, comes in and leads the team in rushing. What's that?
I said mid?
a very, very mid blue chip recruit, but this is a true freshman who has come in and led the team in rushing and been dynamic, had their first receiving touchdown of the day, by the way. It's not just that they have so many 5 stars, which they do, that are just overwhelming everybody. It's that they're also doing a great job of figuring out what do we need, where can we get it from, and can we develop them to be ready for prime time. So the scary thing about this Oregon team is that while I don't, look, obviously, they're going to end up being really good this year. They might, I think it's worth asking whether they're the best team in the country right now. I think they've been as complete through 4 or 5 games as anybody in the country. But I think the scary thing about this is that you kind of look at this team and you're like, this probably wasn't supposed to be their best team, right? And, 26 might be better. 27 might be better with some of the guys that they have on this roster.
Yeah, they're the one team.
You might only get 1 year Dante Moore the way he's playing. So.
Yeah, they'll find another one. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I went into this year saying, man, that so many newer pieces, like guys not with a lot of veteran experience. I was like, you know what? This might be a team that falls out of the top 10. Dumb. I should have been thinking about Clemson.
There's always one.
There's always one out in the top 10 that always falls out. Real quick, guys, before we hit break, is Oregon the number 1 team in the country right now?
So I did not. I put them at number 2 in my CBS 136 ballot behind Ohio State. Ohio State, obviously, great win over Washington, where they looked very good. But it's getting harder and harder to keep making the case that Oregon's not, because again, it's just everything. They're good at everything right now. They have no weaknesses on that team at this point. Now, again, there will be tougher tests, but to go into the whiteout, to handle the moment the way they did, like they look as good as anybody in the country right now. I don't think you can have them any lower than 2. And I think they've got a really, really good case for number 1. I'm maybe 1 or 2 games away from putting Oregon as my number 1, but I think that they very much have a case right now.
I still have Ohio State.
I haven't filled up my ballot yet. I'll let you know in a couple hours.
Same. I'm still looking.
Got to
at
tabulate.
when I start. I mean, listen. Anyway, we all have our different processes, but I need to look at some analytics. But I like my brain just says Oregon number 1, but I need to look at some things between them and Miami and Ohio State. So
those are the 3 in my mind that I think I probably still lean Ohio State a little bit, but it's a toss up between them and Oregon for me right now. I need to look at it a little more.
Hey, the good thing is they got this thing called a playoff, guys, so they could all meet there and figure it out on the field instead of a BCS computer.
Sometimes when you figure it out on the field, it goes differently the second time, as Oregon would tell you. So
that's right.
I don't think. By the way, we're forgetting about Texas Tech. Obviously, they're the 4th team in that number 1 conversation.
No.
Okay. One more break here in the show. College Football Insiders. We'll be back discussing more Ole Miss, LSU, Virginia, Florida State. Remember that big shocker? Next.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
We are back, College Football Insiders, here on a Sunday, live on YouTube and live via tape delay, wherever you find your podcasts. Ole Miss defeats number 4 LSU 24-19. The Rebels were number 13 entering that game. They will certainly rise in every single poll you see out there. The Rebels built a double-digit lead there in the first half, were able to hold on, and were impressive in that final 5 minutes of the game, holding on to the ball, converting 3rd and 4th downs to defeat LSU. I'll tell you one thing. We'll talk plenty about Ole Miss, but LSU's offense can't score, guys. What the hell's going on in Baton Rouge?
I mean, if you think back to Brian Kelly being upset at some of the questioning, and I think we talked about it at the time, it's like, I think he knew, and we've seen that play out. We've talked about it in the show in the past. Chris has made the great points too about like their offensive line has not been very good. They've added some new pieces, and I mean, nothing about it has necessarily shocked me. It felt like from week 1 where they didn't look great, and we gave them credit because it was Clemson. We realized Clemson is not nearly as good as we thought they were, and they feel like they've been leading to this moment for a while. I mean, I think a lot of us picked Ole Miss. Ole Miss was the favorite, so it's not a shock to me that LSU lost this game. And I think what is going to be very important, I think Joe Sloan's a great offensive coordinator, but finding a way to be more than one-dimensional is a real challenge for this team. I don't quite know how you fix that. There's multiple teams now. Alabama's another one when you watch them, like, cannot really run the ball effectively. And when it works and you have your QB play as well as they can, it's okay. But it always feels like you're kind of teetering on the edge. And that's what this LSU team to me has felt like. They finally fell over. They're still a talented team, but that to me is the number one question: is how do you figure that out and not put so much, not like pressure on Garrett Nussmeier, but make it so much easier for the defense to scheme up against you.
And I want to touch on quickly. I wrote a story before the year where I kind of dove into offensive line play, and one of the trends that I kind of found was that transfer heavy lines tend to actually not, even ones that bring in very good transfers, don't tend to perform as well as you would maybe expect with the aggregate level of talent. And I'm curious for you guys, when you look around college football, like you said, there are a lot of programs that are elite programs right now that, one, seem to be having problems on the offensive line, and two, very specifically, are having major issues running the ball.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you guys think is behind that, because this, I mean, look, LSU had 2 NFL tackles last year, fantastic ones, and they weren't good at running the ball. So I'm curious what you guys kind of think is behind that.
Well, I think I think in LSU's case specifically, I would point at right tackle, right? So their right tackle on Saturday got hurt early in the game, but Weston Davis had struggled all season going into that game. And if you would ask those around LSU, the one area they wanted to upgrade in the portal, but never quite did, it was this offensive tackle. They brought in 2 interior offensive linemen, Braylon Moore at center, Josh Thompson at right guard from Northwestern. Both have been very good for them, but what they didn't do out of all the players they brought in was add another transfer offensive tackle. And I think it's really costing them early. Like Weston Davis has really struggled earlier this season. And if you go watch the tape on Saturday, you'll see Ole Miss consistently teeing off on the right side of that offensive line. And I'm not saying that is totally the reason why LSU can't run the ball. I think the issues are a little deeper there. I think something that is Joe Sloan is a great offensive coordinator, but I think he has a tendency to lean towards the pass. I think Garrett Nussmeier has the tendency to trust his arm a little too much and wants to lean towards the pass, and that all kind of comes together. But to me, it comes down to LSU this offseason not getting that offensive tackle they really wanted. They thought that Weston Davis would come along as the season goes, and maybe that'll be the case. Like, he is an NFL body, but he's got to develop, and right now we're just not seeing it.
And I think, Chris, you're making a great point here that I think explains a lot of what I see around the college football landscape, which is watched a lot of these top teams. They all feel like they have a flaw to me. And I think what you've realized, like almost every team probably missed on something that it wanted because the talent is just better dispersed now. Everyone has money. Everyone can go out and get guys. So you look across the board, like the Death Star teams we saw in the past of Alabama, like maybe their flaw was kicking. Now the flaws are bigger. The right tackle is not good enough. It's not having a star running back. It's not having a stud cornerback. Like, all these teams seem to have something that feels like is an issue, which I think is going to make the season so much fun. And like, I know that we all have a tendency to overreact. If people had a peek at our Slack during a college football Saturday, every other play, people were like, that guy's awesome. That guy stinks. Like, there's so much of that. This season is just going to be a yo-yo because every team, at least from what I've seen, seems to have something that you're like, man, that could be exploited. And some of them, it's already happened. Some of them, even Oregon, like when Oregon, they still have some things that you see like, man, Ohio State, I think could exploit that again. Like, there's just every team I think has a little bit of that. We probably all just have to get used to the fact that there's no perfect team. And a lot of these teams are going to yo-yo from week to week, just depending on who they play.
Is Trinidad Chambliss their quarterback moving forward? Can you even somehow explain away putting Austin Simmons back out there at quarterback for Ole Miss?
Chambliss is the guy, and I'll let Chris, because I know he did a great story about him. But the thing that I have heard over and over again, when they were kind of going through this the last couple of weeks, is that, and it's hard to quantify, but what I heard over and over again was that Chambliss has the it factor, that there's just something about him that the guys on that team rally around and resonate with in a way that, not to knock Austin Simmons, but that team does not rally around him the same way. Some of that is a personality thing. Austin has been explained to me as a bit more robotic as a personality. Chambliss is different, and you're just seeing it growing and growing and growing. And I just don't see, with the success that they've had, any way that you can turn back to Simmons, which means that he will probably hit the portal at the end of the year. Someone will be lucky to have him. But this Ole Miss team plays differently with this guy, and you can just tell they have a different spirit around them.
And I will say this of Chambliss. This is coming from an Ole Miss staffer that I talked to this week when I was reporting on that story with Richard Johnson about Trinidad. They basically just said, Chambliss, get you out of trouble, right? His legs just provide another element to this Ole Miss offense that is not there under Austin Simmons, and it makes a huge difference. And I think what's interesting about Trinidad real quick is, we can talk about this more later in the year. He is a senior in eligibility terms, but he could actually have another year because Division II does not do red shirts. At least it didn't in 2022. They adopted a rule in 2025. So there's a chance, we're looking at Trinidad Chambliss as a short-term option for Ole Miss as they go all in towards the playoff. But if he gets a waiver approved, which I think is a real possibility in this climate, Trinidad Chambliss could actually be there for next season as well.
And Chris, to your point real fast, I talked to someone after the Arkansas win, and this person at Ole Miss told me two things. One, we felt like we probably wouldn't have won this game if Austin was a starter, which I thought was interesting. And two, the way things were trending, I think they believe that they will, have a good shot at this guy getting to come back another year. And this person told me, at the end of the day, when it comes to whether Lane's going to fight to keep Chambliss or Simmons. I think in this moment, it's going to be to fight to keep Chambliss for another year. And again, that was just after the Arkansas win, and he's almost gotten better since then. But I think they feel like they have a potential, multi-year solution. And he's just a lot of fun to watch.
He's awesome.
Ole Miss gets a bye week now, and they get to soak up the victory, heal some wounds. Then they host Washington State, W. And then comes the big stretch, guys. At Georgia, at Oklahoma, and then they host South Carolina. So season-defining stretch coming up for the Rebels, and Ole Miss might be playing an Oklahoma team without their quarterback, John Mateer, who had surgery on his right throwing hand to repair a broken bone. But there is some more confidence there, as our Matt Zenitz at CBS Sports reported, that maybe he could even be ready to go as early as Red River in mid to late October. We'll see. But
I think that was very optimistic phrasing.
Yeah, I would think so, right? Based off the surgery and what they had to do. But I'll tell you what, Ole Miss has got a shot here. Not to belabor the point and keep bringing this up, and we probably will for the next several weeks, but is this year Ole Miss finally, for the first time ever, gets to the SEC championship game?
It's been a long, this, Brandon, you've been in SEC country for a long time. It's been a long-standing joke that Ole Miss fans don't know how to get to Atlanta because they don't play in the SEC championship game. But what I want to see is the consistency. I was at Ole Miss, Georgia last year, and I came away from that thinking Ole Miss might be the best team in the country, and then they lose to Kentucky, they lose to Florida. So it's like I want to see the consistency. Washington State should be a win, but let's see it first. Lane sometimes, like Kalen Deboer, can get up for the big ones and sometimes struggles week to week. But this feels like a team that has a lot. Again, they're playing great, and I think one of the things, and I'm going to write about this at some point, but they had a lot of staff continuity, and I think that's sometimes that's underrated. But they're bringing back offensive coordinator, bringing back defensive coordinator. Joe Judge, who could have gone to UNC with Bill Belichick, stayed to be the quarterback coach. They just have a lot of staff continuity, and I think it's been really helpful for Lane. He feels very well settled there, got a lot of talent, and they seem to be in a really good place.
Okay, this seems like millennia ago, but that's how college football works when you play games on Friday night or a Thursday night. But remember Friday night way back when Virginia upset number 8? Yeah, number 8 Florida State 46-38 in double overtime. A very entertaining game. Florida State had a couple of early turnovers. Virginia took a 14-0 lead, and Florida State was pretty much playing catch up all night. They briefly took the lead, but then Virginia and Chandler Morris at quarterback fired back and responded. Very impressive victory for Virginia, obviously. Disheartening for Florida State. Talk about a roller coaster. You go from number 1 to missing the college football playoff in the span of 2 weeks to 2-10 the next season to beating Alabama in week 1 and going into the top 10 to losing to Virginia on the road in a repeat of a game that happened 30 years ago in 1995. Virginia fans remember that one very well. But let's talk Virginia, guys, because we're all talking about how'd we get here. This Virginia program had an inflection point this offseason, right? Right after Tony Elliott led Virginia to a loss against Virginia Tech last year in their rivalry game, an anonymous booster who is still anonymous stepped up, and it wasn't Ted Danson, stepped up and came in. No, it's a joke from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just went right over.
Yeah, big boomer joke. So anonymous booster goes in and provides the largest, they say, one-time cash gift in history there. And it was to go directly to their NIL situation and to help secure better rosters in the future. And their general manager there, Tyler Jones, said this summer that at that moment, our recruiting board changed overnight. And they started going after guys that they thought they could get and ended up getting. So they brought in 32 new players. And I'm told, my sourcing there tells me that they spent at least $20 million to help snag this portal class, which sounds outrageous, especially for Virginia. but they've got that kind of money right now. And among those players in that haul was Chandler Morris, but also some other big-time guys that had a lot of success at smaller programs, including FCS programs, that are hungry and wanted to go out there and prove themselves even further. And what you saw out there Friday night was 19 of those 32 new transfers playing a huge role in that game. 8 of them starters, 4 on offense, 4 on defense. And most importantly for that offense, those starters, for the most part, are skill players. Chandler Morris at quarterback, a veteran presence who can also run the ball. You've got their top 2 pass catchers, both new transfers. Their top running back, a new transfer. Their leading tackler on defense, a new transfer. The cornerback who gets you 2 interceptions in the game, including the game-clinching one in the end zone in double overtime, a transfer. So Virginia was able to find and get the type of players they wanted. And now Tony Elliott has Virginia, I would think, by the time we get done with this, in the top 25 and dreaming big. Guys, have you looked at Virginia's schedule?
I feel like we're saying this about every single ACC team because there's so many bad teams in the ACC that like the 5 good ones are just like, you only have to play all the bad ones.
Virginia has as good a chance as anybody. I mean, Miami and maybe it looks like the class of the ACC, but they don't have to play Clemson. They don't have to play Miami. I mean, Virginia's a guy with pretty good schedule remaining.
I do want to say, Brandon, to your point earlier, I remember talking to a P4 GM during the December transfer window and them saying, why are we recruiting against Virginia so much? And that goes to your point about the infusion of cash. Like, Virginia was dropping bags this summer in the portal, or this offseason in the portal. There's no question about that. But you also, I think you have to give Tony Elliott and his staff a lot of credit, especially offensively. A lot of their investment was along the offensive line. I'm thinking about bringing in a guy like Monroe Mills, Louisville's starting left tackle last year, and just sniping him out of the portal. He got hurt. He's out for the season. He got hurt during the summer. Like several of Virginia's offensive line transfers that they brought in expecting to be big contributors are hurt. I think they're down 5 offensive linemen right now, and they're winning despite that. So there's like, yes, the investment certainly helps. Like, I don't think Virginia would be where it's at without that cash infusion in the program. But Tony Elliott and his staff are also doing an incredible job this year on the field, getting the most out of that roster they were given a chance to have.
A lot of good stuff going on there in Charlottesville. I think, what do we think of Chandler Morris as a quarterback? This is his 4th school. Shahan, you've seen him up close, right?
Many times.
What do you think of what we're seeing from Chandler Morris right now in the early goings of Virginia?
Well, the thing with him has always been that he struggled to stay healthy. He's a smaller guy. He's tried to add a little bit more weight onto his frame. And I think at North Texas last year was kind of the opportunity that he finally got to do that. And I think he grew a lot under Eric Morris, who, maybe one of the most underrated quarterback developers in America. Maybe not even underrated anymore. Maybe people know, but now coming to Virginia, and you see the good and the bad, right? You see the interceptions, but you also see the playmaking. You also see the dynamic stuff that he can do with his legs and with his arms. And I think that just gives you a chance. And, again, we talked about the issues with offensive line play and Chris, of course, mentioned having 5 offensive linemen out. I think that when you have some of those issues, having a mobile quarterback just helps you so much, because it lets you add another in the run game. It allows you to come from different angles. It forces the defense to play you differently, even on passing downs. And I think that was the case against Virginia and Florida State. Like this, I think that if you just looked at Chandler Morris's passing numbers and passing progression, doesn't necessarily jump off the page, but I believe he added 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns as well in that game, 5 total touchdowns, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So that's what you need. You take the high variance at this point because you just need something that pushes you towards high level play. And I think Chandler Morris has been a really good addition. Frankly, to be honest, I was a little shocked when I heard, 1, the kind of numbers that were being thrown out for Chandler Morris, and 2, that Virginia kind of went all in on him. I thought that he was very good at North Texas, but probably had found his level, I guess you could say, but they've done a really good job, I think, of maximizing what he can do.
He was paid over $1 million for this year, I've been told. And on your point,
I will say, don't forget, like Chandler Morris started 2 seasons in a row for TCU for a reason over Josh Hoover and Max Duggan. Like, this is a guy that, like, there's never been a talent issue. It's been a health issue for him generally.
Yeah, and Chandler Morris, by the way, one of only 3 quarterbacks in ACC history to score multiple touchdowns through the air and on the ground against a top 10 team. Only 3 in history have done it, and the other ones are household names. Okay, we end every show here on Sunday with one more thing, something else that really caught our eyes out there in the college football world. What caught your eye, Shahan? What's going on?
So, like, what's going on at Liberty right now? Jamie Chadwell is one of the highest paid coaches in the group of 5. They have one of the most they have clearly the most expensive roster in Conference USA and one of the more expensive rosters in the group of 5. And they just lost their 4th straight game against FBS competition. So their games so far this year, they beat Maine, 34-24 loss at Jacksonville State. 23-13 loss at Bowling Green, 31-13 loss at James Madison. That one's a little defensible. But this last week, 21-7 against Old Dominion. Jamie Chadwell's a coach I've been very high on over the years, but this is crazy. Like, this is unbelievable. I mean, I haven't talked to people around Conference USA before the season, and there is even in the league sort of this like mindset of like, well, it's Liberty and everybody else. I don't know what's going on there because, again, this is a team that is just struggling to do much of anything. I know that quarterback has been an issue for them. I checked in midway through the 3rd quarter, and I believe they had 6 passing yards on 8 attempts. So maybe it's just they need to find their next Caden Salter, but it is unbelievable to see a Liberty team that puts this much into their program and their roster completely flail.
Chris, what you got?
Yeah, I agreed, Shahan. It is interesting. My dog also wants to chime in, so maybe John can go in the meantime, and then I'll finish.
Well, I think again, it's kind of what I was saying earlier about like there's just a tendency, especially early in the season, to overreact. And so go back a week ago, and Illinois gets absolutely crushed against Indiana, and there's this like this team stinks, they're trash, they're done, and yet they come back and they beat USC. And I think this was such an important situation for Illinois. It's kind of like we were talking about earlier of Arkansas, like. You can't let it, you needed to kind of have a stop here, especially with Ohio State coming up in 2 weeks. And Illinois, I mean, it wasn't always pretty, but to beat USC was important as a top 25 team. Shows that this Illinois team is maybe better than we gave them credit for a week ago. On the flip side, Indiana had its hands full against Iowa, and maybe they're not quite as great as we thought they were based on what we saw last week. So it's going to be a lot of variance all year, but credit to Brett to get a win that I think was important for Illinois to stay in the hunt for what their preseason expectations and hopes were, which you are to be in that playoff mix.
Hey, Kurt Cignetti did say that this game against Iowa was going to be tougher than the one against Illinois.
He was not wrong.
Yeah,
prove that to be accurate.
But Iowa does that to you, man. They get you in the mud and they make you fight.
Yeah, no question. I think that is I will say that is 12 straight losses for Iowa against ranked opponents, I believe. So
yes, I saw that stat.
Something to keep in mind on there. I wanted to actually touch on USC a little bit as well. I think we've seen a uptick in smarter situational coaching across college football this year, and I don't think there's a better example of that than what we saw Lincoln Riley do and what Major Applewhite did, the head coach of South Alabama, on Saturday. Both coaches were up, down 14. They scored a touchdown, and you have the situation where usually I think a coach would just kick an extra point if they weren't paying attention to analytics. But both coaches opted to go for 2. They both converted that 2-point conversion. It didn't work out for South Alabama. They lost to UNT. But USC actually, because of that conversion, went ahead of Illinois later in the 4th quarter by 1 point with 2 minutes remaining. And that's like the flexibility going for 2 gives you in those situations. It really gives you a lot of optionality. It puts you in a better statistical chance to win the game in that situation. And I thought it was really notable to see Lincoln Riley and Major Applewhite, 2 very conservative coaches usually. Lincoln Riley, famously conservative going back to his Oklahoma days in terms of his 4th down. I think the rate he went for it on 4th down, like how he handled 2-point situations with the offenses he had. And to see Lincoln Riley and Major Applewhite do that on Saturday, I think really signaled a bit of a shift in college football that coaches are going to be a little bit more aggressive in these situations because the book tells them to do so. And more coaches are paying attention to analytics, even those who have traditionally been more stubborn in those situations.
And to jump off of that too, I mean, it's like almost everywhere in the country right now. If you're within the 40s, you're going for it. Like it is, I think that we are seeing so much more aggression than we've seen in years past. Even if you want to talk about, and obviously for Georgia, it didn't work out, but like to go for it on 4th down in the red zone instead of just taking the tie. Like this is something that we're seeing a lot more of these days. And, you know, like Chris said, I think that it's quite an indication that a lot of coaches, even though they might besmirch the numbers or the probabilities or all this sort of stuff publicly, they're all reading the same book. And I think that they're making good decisions that help their teams win.
Yeah, I wrote on after week 1 this year that it was at a record high of going for it on 4th downs through week 1. Obviously, this is the season opener, but as you said, you watch these games, you're seeing much more aggressiveness out there on 4th downs. And certainly makes the games more exciting and upsets fans or gets them going as well. For me, my one more thing is, man, the ACC is wild, and I'm loving it. I absolutely love it. You saw Wake Forest go up big early against Georgia Tech. Then they battle back and forth in the second half, and Georgia Tech ends up eking it out by picking off a 2-point pass there in overtime. Haynes King had to throw the ball 42 times. You have Duke upsetting Syracuse a week after Syracuse beat Clemson 38-3. But of course, Syracuse without quarterback Steve Angeli, who's out for the year. But that happened there in Syracuse as well. So credit to Manny Diaz and Darren Mensah. I was trying to get ahead of myself with Darren. Louisville having a rally on the road against Pittsburgh at Pitt.
That game was wild.
Really?
Wild
I didn't get to see any of it. Yeah.
Here's how, I'm sorry. Just Pitt's final 4 drives, they were up big in this game. They went like this: lost it on downs, interception, lost it on downs, interception. Like Pitt absolutely blew that game. Like,
oh, no.
They had every chance to win that game. Put it away.
I would not want to be in Narduzzi's eyesight.
Did they bench Holstein at the end? I thought I saw something about that.
Yeah, I believe
I don't remember them benching Holstein, but it was in a 4 box for me, so I can't say it was like.
I believe they did bench Holstein. They brought in because they have. I believe the kid's name is Cole Gonzalez, who was Cade Bell's quarterback at Western Carolina, spent the spring at Oklahoma, came up. So I think for that final sequence, they had Gonzalez in the game. But all I'm hearing, though, right now is that the ACC Coastal has broken contain. We've gotten rid of divisions, and now just everybody's the ACC Coastal.
Oh, my gosh. I'm looking at the QB ratings for the Pitt quarterbacks right now. Oh, my gosh. Eli Holstein, 35.5. Cole Gonzalez, 44.2. They combined for 3 interceptions. Oh, gosh. Yeah, exactly. Woof. Okay. And Virginia Tech, hey, credit to them under interim coach Philip Montgomery, beating NC State 23-21. Philip Montgomery now 1-0. ACC is going to be wild. We'll see. The biggest game of the ACC so far earlier this season is next week with Miami going to Florida State. Miami coming off a bye week too. Florida State coming off that upsetting loss to Virginia. Okay, guys.
Correction. Producer Aaron points it out. The game of the year in the ACC is actually Virginia going to Berkeley.
It's just too bad Aaron doesn't have a microphone. You know? All right, guys. What a show. What a week 5. We will have much more later on this week when we return to the College Football Insiders Tuesday and Thursday. And then, of course, again next Sunday to recap everything. Again, I'm Brendan Marcello. And for Chris Hummer and John Talty and Shahan Jayaraja, we will see you down the road.